Welcome to the Medium in the Middle podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, the medium in the middle. This podcast is going to walk you through my journey into mediumship and how I came to realize that I could communicate with souls that have passed over. My adventure started just over a year ago when unusual situations started happening to me. It wasn't until I really started to pay attention to them that it all started to come together. I wrote down everything that I was experiencing this past year in a little black book, and this podcast is going to be a recap of all of those memories leading up to where I am today in my mediumship journey. I will be releasing new episodes every Tuesday, and I recommend listening to the podcast in order, starting with episode 1, as my story will unfold more week by week. If you would like to stay connected with me, follow me on Instagram at mediuminthemiddle. Hello everyone, and welcome back to episode 9. I am so excited to share this episode with you. For the last episode, I left you on the edge of your seats, wondering what was going to happen in this episode, so I am very excited to get into it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel so that you get an update every Tuesday when we release new episodes, and if you feel called to, I would love a rating and a review. Okay, so let's jump right back into it. So on episode 8, I left you with, I was driving home from work and I was getting all this information. And when I got home, I got the message from Tara that yes, the information fit Frank's son. So before I dive right back into that story, I want to talk about a few things that were happening before that will make this all make even more sense. So if I remember correctly, I believe this is the first time that I ever had a soul following me around. This happens now more and more, and I'm kind of used to it, but this was the first time that I remember this happened. So for about a week before this day, I was telling Joe that there was someone in our house, and I remember saying to him, "Joe, there's someone here." And he was kind of like, "Okay, Steph, like, who is it?" I was like, "I don't know, it's like a boy, he has dark hair, and he's just sitting on the couch." And Joe would say, "Well, what does he want?" And I'm like, "I don't know, he hasn't said anything yet." And he said, "Okay, well, how old is he?" And I'm like, "I don't know, he's 20, 22, and he's just sitting on the couch." And Joe was like, "Steph, that's not a boy." I was like, "Okay, well, it's just a boy is sitting on the couch." So the day before episode 8, Tara and another friend came over. And Tara had brought a bottle of wine, and the wine was called Josh. And when she took it out of the bag, I was like, "Oh, wow, that's such a coincidence." Today I was doing Reiki on someone, and I actually channeled one of her sons, and his name was Josh. I was like, it must be a little sign that he was here, that you brought this bottle of wine called Josh. And today, the person that I channeled's name was Josh. And Tara said, "Yeah, like, that's crazy. What a coincidence." Again, not the biggest deal. It was just kind of a reminder of what was going on and happening to me. So that night, Tara and I and another friend, we had a great time. We had wine and cheese and just hung out. I didn't tell her about the boy that was in the living room. It didn't seem relevant. And that was all. So we're going to fast forward again back to my drive home. So now it's the next day. After the experience that I had with those two strangers in the mall, telling them about their passed away dad, I'm driving home and I'm thinking about Tara's mom and her brothers sitting around a table. I remember this as I'm driving home, I'm thinking about them because the whole experience that happened in episode 4 was with her father. So this was about a week before. So I was just driving home and thinking about her mom and thinking about her brothers, and they were sitting around this round table. It was a round white table. And all of a sudden, this boy appeared who was between 20 and 22, and he had dark hair. It was a little longer. He had this sly smile, and he starts to tell me this information. And how I get the information is kind of a thought in my mind that I wasn't thinking of, and it kind of comes to me randomly. So if all of a sudden I'm getting these streams of information, I now know that it's not from me, it's from someone else, and it's just my sense of knowing. So I started to get this stream of information. So he starts to tell me, I was 22 when I died. I died in an accident that they thought was a suicide. Before I died, I was fighting with my dad. Me and my dad were in this fight. And he starts to tell me these things. So then I'm thinking about who this person could be as I'm driving home. And I'm thinking, maybe this is Frank's son, because the week before, he had sent that sentence to me. He had said, sorry I didn't think about my brother right away. I was hoping to hear from my son. And I was thinking, who else could this be? I don't have anyone else that I know of that would have had a boy or a son die this young. And also, why would he be at the table with Tara's family? Like, there has to be a connection for him to have walked into that table scenario. So I called Tara, and Tara and I are best friends, so when I call her, she always answers, and she didn't answer. And I was like, that's weird. Hang up. I call her again. She didn't answer. I was like, weird. Hang up. Call her again. She didn't answer. I said, all right, she must be busy. But because this information was coming to me so quickly, and at the time I didn't really know how to remember the information, because they aren't my thoughts or my memories. So it's like someone telling you something in your ear, and then you have to repeat it. But when they're just telling it to you and moving on, you have to, well, for me personally, I like to say the information right away so that I don't forget anything or get anything wrong. I like to repeat it just the way they say it to me. So as I'm driving, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have to pull over and write this information down, or I'm going to forget when I tell Tara later. So I pull off the highway and I message Tara all the information that I have. I said, was Frank's son 20 to 22 years old when he died? Did he have long, straight, dark hair? Was he in an accident that people thought was a suicide? Was the last thing he was talking to with his dad, were they in a fight and arguing? And I waited a few moments for her to text me back, and she didn't text me back. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to keep driving home. So I pull back onto the highway and I continue my drive home. When I get home, I check my phone when I get in the door, and I have a message from Tara, and it says, I just turned my phone and showed it to Frank. He said, yes, everything is correct. He started to immediately cry, so he's going to pull himself together and he's going to call you. And I said, all right, have him call me. I'm going to figure out how I do this over the phone kind of thing, because I had never done it where the person wasn't sitting right in front of me. So in this moment, I'm walking in the door from work. It's now 10 p.m., 10:30, and Joe's home, and I'm frantic on the phone because I'm saying, okay, have him call me when he's ready. I'm going to try to get more information for you. And I'm walking in, yelling, the boy that was here, he's here again. He's for Frank. And Joe's like, what's going on? And I said, that boy that I've been telling you that's been here in the living room for like the past week? And he was like, yeah. I was like, I just found out who he belongs to. He's Frank's son. He's going to be calling me back, and I have to tell him everything that he's telling him. And at this point, this was still so new and so fresh. I can't stress enough how new I am in my journey and how this is the beginning. And this was the very, very beginning. A year later, I'm still at the beginning. So Joe was kind of like, okay, what do you want me to do? And I was like, I just need to go and sit, and I need to call, and we need to talk to Frank, and and I was kind of freaking out because there was this flood of information coming at me. So I still remember I went to the top of the stairs and I sat down on the stairs. And I don't exactly know why I did that, but that's where I sat. And I stared at my phone. I was holding my phone, waiting for Frank to call me. And it had been a few minutes because I had walked in the door. I had said this to Joe. I walked upstairs very flustered, and then I was sitting on the stairs holding my phone, ready for them to call me back, kind of thinking, what's taking so long? Why aren't they calling me back? So finally my phone rings from what is Frank's number, so it's not Tara's number. So I pick up the phone and I say, hello. And from the other side of the phone is a very solemn voice, and it said, hi, Steph. And I said, hi, I'm sorry, I know it's late. I was just driving home from work and I started to get all this information and I just thought maybe it could be your son. So does all that information make sense? Were you fighting when he died? Did you guys think it was a suicide when it wasn't a suicide? And Frank's first words were, it wasn't a suicide. And it was as if Josh, who was his son, started yelling. He was yelling, Dad, I didn't kill myself. Dad, I didn't kill myself. Dad, it was an accident. And Frank started crying on the phone again. And I said, he is really stressing that he did not kill himself. This was an accident. This was an accident. Dad, I would never kill myself. I would never do that. And I started to tell him the rest of the information. And I started to tell him the rest of the information that I got in the car. And he said, yes, that all makes sense. And I was saying, he feels like you're stuck in this guilt. And you're holding on to this guilt because the last thing you guys said where you were fighting with each other. And you think you're a bad dad. And you're going through all these things in your head. And how could it end that way? And this is all your fault. And he's literally screaming at me to scream at you. Dad, stop. Stop, stop, stop. I don't want you to remember us fighting. I don't want you to remember that last conversation and keep playing it over and over in your mind. He said, I want you to remember the 20 years we had together, not focusing on the 20 years you haven't had with me, holding on to so much guilt and pain. He said, yes, we were fighting, but I don't remember our relationship as you fighting with me. He said, I know you. I know 20 years of you. I'm not going to let that last conversation that we had ruin our whole relationship, our whole 20 years. He said, stop thinking of the 20 years without me. Think of the 20 years you had with me. He said, I know I've been gone for a long time, but you've been holding this in, and you need to stop. You need to let it go. You need to stop holding on to this guilt. It's not your guilt. And he was saying, Dad, it was an accident. It was an accident. He said, you guys thought that there was drugs involved, and you guys thought that I was doing this on purpose. He said, it wasn't that. That wasn't the case. He said, of course it was an accident. He said, I loved my life. I loved you. I loved Mom. I loved our brother and our sister. He said, how would I ever do that to myself? He said, I would never do it on purpose. I was being stupid. I was being reckless, and it was an accident. I didn't kill myself. It was an accident. So just like in the other times that this had happened, I asked Frank to not tell me anything until the end. I was like, let me just tell you everything he has to say, and then at the end, explain the story to me. So then Josh continues to tell me information. And I said, I feel like I got into this car crash, and I didn't die on the scene. I died in the hospital maybe days later, or hours later. And Frank said, yes. So I said, okay, and I see the hospital bed, and I see everybody's around me. My brother's there, my sister's there, you're there, and I can feel my sister holding my hand. She's on my right side of the bed, and she's holding my hand, and everybody's talking to me and whispering my ear, and I hear everything you're saying, and I remember everybody around me. And Frank said, yes. And then he went back to his original point. He said, I want you to remember that I remember my happy life. I remember I was so close with my brother and my sister. I remember how great of a life you provided for us. He said, I don't want you to be stuck that this last memory of us together is how I remember you. That's not the case. And he said, my sister has a son who's 7 or 8 years old. And I feel like he kind of reminds her of me. He's playful like me, and he's, has the same personality as me. And I kind of, when I was describing Josh to Frank, I was like, he's this like sly guy. He has this kind of smile that, he's a charmer. When he walks in a room, like people look at him, and he has this like ability to charm the room. And I just kept saying he has this sly smile. He has this sly guy smile. And with the hair and the whole look, I said, he was a good looking kid. And Frank laughed and he was like, yeah, he was a good looking kid. And he was a sly guy. He had this personality where everybody would like him. When he walked into a room, he lit up the room. The older ladies loved his personality and all those things. And I said, I feel like this kid kind of reminds you guys of me. And Frank was like, no, my daughter doesn't have a kid. My daughter doesn't have a kid. And I was like, okay. I'm like, he's really showing me this child connected to the sister. I was like, but okay, like if that doesn't fit, we'll just move on. So this was about a 40-minute phone call. And for a big part of this call, it was Josh telling his dad, really he was yelling at his dad, Dad, I didn't commit suicide, it was an accident. Dad, stop holding the guilt that you've been holding for the past 20 years. Dad, stop focusing on the 20 years you missed and focus on the 20 years we had together. And he was stressing the point that he does not remember his dad as them fighting. He remembers him being an amazing dad, and he really needed him to know that. So then, just before the soul was leaving, I said, okay, now they're showing me this scene, and your brother's there, and your dad is there, and Josh, and they're all sitting in like this dark movie theater, and they're watching a movie, but the movie is your family's life. So they want you to know that they're watching you, they see what's happening in your life, and it's like they're all sitting in a movie theater watching your life, their sister's life, mom's life, everyone. And then the soul I started to burp and the soul left. And then Frank said, okay, can I explain everything to you now? And I said, yes, please. Like, I need to know what happened. Like, how did he die? What was this accident that you thought was a suicide? So he said, so he died in a car crash, but we thought that he was doing drugs and he was driving so recklessly that we thought he was doing it on purpose. So he was driving down this big winding road. He was driving fast in one of my cars that he had just stolen from me because he was angry. And because he was driving so recklessly, he got into an accident and he killed himself. So we thought that he had done this on purpose. He said, it literally is the biggest weight off my shoulders to know that it was an accident. He said, Steph, for 20 years, I thought it was a suicide. And I started crying because I was like, what a powerful message for Josh to come through and tell you that it wasn't. He was literally screaming, Dad, I didn't kill myself. Dad, I didn't kill myself. And he said, we were fighting right before this, and we got into this big fight, and it was this serious fight. It was over, stupid stuff that family fights about. But then I felt so guilty because he took my car that I had from work and he raced it away. And he said, how could I not feel guilty? That was my car and we were fighting before. And the last thing we said was an argument. And I just felt awful. And it's been 20 years since he'd been gone. And I just keep thinking, what if he was here? What if he was here? And he said his sister was in the room and they were very close. And the fact that you even said that they're all sitting in a movie theater watching our life, he says, that's crazy because going to the movies was like our thing. We would all go to the movies together. The movie theater is very fitting. He said, I can't believe you just said that because movies are so important to us. And then he kind of got quiet on the phone. Frank got quiet. And he was emotional and I was emotional at this point too. Like, this was a big moving experience. Joe is downstairs kind of standing at the bottom of the stairs looking at me, being like, I can't believe you have this man on the phone who's pretty much a stranger crying. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you right now, but we were trying to finish the conversation. So Frank says, Steph, I know we've had the experience last week, and he said, I did believe you then. He's like, there's no way I couldn't not believe you with how much you told me about my brother. He said, but for this, the way that you said he was a sly guy, charming smile, the way that you said it, he said, I know that you were looking at him because Josh was known for being charming. Josh was known for that smile that lit up the room, his personality. He said, there's not a doubt in my mind that when you were describing him, you were looking right at him and you knew what he looked like. He said, how else would you know that? How else would you know that he was this charming guy? He said, the way you said it, I knew you were staring at him. And that was great feedback for me. And I was like, oh my God, wow. Like, okay, that was something I didn't even realize it was an important factor, but that's how you really knew. By this point, it was very late. It was after 11 p.m. and he was very emotional. He said, Steph, thank you so much for this. I can't even begin to describe what you've just done for me. He said, I need time to reflect and kind of digest this. I'll talk to you later. So he hands the phone back to Tara. Tara was like, oh my God. She said, I knew nothing about Josh. She said, Frank doesn't talk about him. She said, I know he had the son that passed away, but I didn't know any of this. She said, I don't even know how you knew any of this. This is really wild. And it was kind of like a big night. So we all say goodnight. We'll talk the next day. I hang up the phone and I'm sitting on the top of the stairs. And Joe's at the bottom of the stairs and he's looking at me and he's saying, Steph, what the hell was that? And I was kind of really drained at this point. And I was like, I don't know. It's like, I didn't even have a chance to tell you. I went up to a stranger in the mall today. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, like it's just been a crazy day. I can't talk about it right now. Like this is just too much. He was like, how did you just have a stranger on the phone crying who was older? Like this is just all so much. He's like, Steph, are you sure you're okay? I was like, yeah, I think I'm okay. And then the phone rings again. And it's Frank. So I answer the phone and I was like, hello? And he said, hey, oh my God. He said, I told you that my daughter doesn't have a son. She does have a son. I don't even know why I said she didn't have a son. She does have a son. He is 7 years old. He does remind us of Josh. He said, I don't know why my mind completely blanked. I'm so sorry. That is 1,000% true. I'm sorry that I told you that she didn't have a son. She has a son. She has a son. I was so wrapped up in the moment. And I was like, oh, it's okay. I was like, sometimes this happens where information is just, it's too much coming at you at once. He said, okay, I just wanted to let you know that because it just came to me. I said, all right, like, have a good night. Like, let this all sink in. I know it's a lot and it's late and it came out of nowhere. I'm like, I'm sorry for just pouncing this on you. I just had to share the information. He said, don't be sorry. I'm so happy to know this. I'll talk to you tomorrow. So we hang up the phone again and I'm blown away. And again, another experience of when I can tell someone, just like for Tori when I said, your dad died of something of the chest. No, your dad died of something of the chest. Like, wow, I really can't breathe. No. Finally, how did your dad pass away? Oh, he had lung cancer. This was kind of another example of that where, oh, your daughter has a son. No. Your daughter has a son. No. Calls me back. Of course she has a son. How could I forget that? I think in the moment when these experiences are happening to people, number one, they're not expected. Unless you're physically coming to me with an appointment and you want to talk to someone, which, as I mentioned, I still do not do full mediumship offerings. I don't offer for you to come and I do a mediumship reading for you. I still am in the realm of Reiki or energy healing if you want a little bit more, but I don't advertise as that. Most people who are in this town know what I do, so they come, but that's not what I advertise. So, unless you're specifically coming to an appointment with me, if we're just at a dinner party or if I call you in the middle of the night to tell you this information, you're not expecting it. And I think it's so overwhelming that people don't know what to do. Their immediate response is just no. And that's totally fine. It's totally okay for you to not have all the information sink in. I've had people tell me months later, hey, when you told me this, I said no, but I just realized, oh my God, yes, that's true. So this was a really big day for me. In this day, I went to work where I told the first stranger I've ever told a message. I then drove home and got random information, which I shared with a man I've only met once, which was all too accurate to be random. It was just eerily accurate. And as I'm going to bed that night, I remember laying in bed just thinking, what is happening to me? What is this transition? What's going on? I think this is here to stay. This is too real. This is just too real for me, and there's now been so many people touched and affected. This isn't just a fluke. This isn't a one-off. This is something. So now, to keep you in the timeline, we're at the middle of October, and I have about a week and a half left before I leave to go out west. So there are a few more big things that happen before I leave, and I'm going to be sharing them in the next few episodes. So thank you for listening to this episode. I really appreciate you tuning in. Again, if you want to stay connected with the podcast, please press subscribe. Our new episodes will pop up every week when they're released on Tuesday. And on your screen, there should be a little spot where you can rate this podcast. If you could just click the 5 stars and leave a little review, I would love to hear what you think. And if you want even more of Medium in the Middle, please feel free to follow us on Instagram. I post some pictures and some stories, and I talk about the episodes on there as well. So again, thank you for listening. I appreciate it so much, and you following my journey and my story. And I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye!